The envelope was thick. No return address. My gut told me what was inside before I even opened it. I'd seen this kind of thing before, intel, a warning, or a setup. The weight of it in my hands felt familiar. I ripped the seal and pulled out the contents. Photographs. Crisp, high quality. No grain, no blur. This wasn't a sloppy job. Someone wanted me to see this. Valerie, my wife, laughing in the passenger seat of a black Mercedes. Her long red hair catching the light. Another photo, her hand on a man's arm, a restaurant setting, a bottle of wine between them. And then the third, her leaning in, lips close to his ear. I flipped through them, my pulse steady. My hands didn't shake. Years of training had drilled that out of me. Reactions got men killed. I laid the photos out on the kitchen table, aligning the edges. The man in the pictures was easy to recognize. Travis Vaughn. Wealthy. Connected. Liked to play the benefactor, always front and center at charity galas, always giving the right amount of money to the right people. The kind of guy who never heard no in his life. I pushed the photos away and leaned back in my chair. I had 2 questions. Who sent these? And why? Valerie's keys jingled at the front door. A few seconds later, she stepped into the kitchen, humming some tune I didn't recognize. She stopped when she saw me sitting there, the photos laid out in plain view. Clayton? She smiled, but her eyes darted to the table. A fraction of a second delay, but I caught it. She wasn't surprised. She was calculating. I said nothing. Just watched. She put her purse down and laughed, a little forced. What's with the FBI setup? You tailing someone? I stayed quiet. Let the silence work. People hated silence. It made them fill the space. Valerie's fingers twitched. Clayton, what is this? I let a beat pass before answering. You tell me. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Then, right on cue, the performance began. A small frown, a tilt of the head. Feigned confusion. What? Clayton, why are you looking at me like that? I studied her, the way her fingers curled slightly at her sides. The way her breathing had changed, just a little faster. The way she wouldn't hold eye contact for more than a second. It's nothing, I said, standing up, grabbing the photos and stacking them neatly. Just some paperwork I needed to review. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. The relief was instant. That told me everything I needed to know. I grabbed my keys and headed out. The old Ford started on the second try. The truck was like me, built for function, a little banged up, but still moving forward. I drove without music, without distraction, just the sound of tires rolling over asphalt. I needed information, and I knew just the guy to get it. Nelson McAllister ran his business out of a hole-in-the-wall office in the back of a strip mall between a pawn shop and a barber shop. His door was slightly ajar when I got there. I pushed it open without knocking. He looked up from his desk, chewing the end of an unlit cigar. His trench coat was draped over the back of his chair. Well, haven't seen you in a while, Carlisle. Thought you'd gone soft on me. Need a job done. I dropped the photos onto his desk. He flicked through them, eyes scanning quick. Huh. Fancy bastard. He's got the look, clean money, old-school charm. Women eat that up. He set the pictures down, tapping them. What's the angle? Find out who sent these. And when she started seeing him, Nelson let out a breath through his nose. Cold. You already know she's screwing him. Most guys in your shoes come in here half-drunk, looking to confirm what they already know. Most guys aren't me. He smirked. Fair enough. He leaned back, pulling open a drawer and tossing a notepad onto the desk. Vaughn's got connections. No doubt about it. If he's in bed with your wife, he's got her wrapped up in more than just silk sheets. I said nothing. Nelson scratched the back of his head. I'll need a day or 2. If someone went through the trouble of getting you these, they had a reason. You want me to dig into them too? I nodded. He grunted. All right. You want the full package? Background, recent movements, business dealings? Yeah. And I want to know if he's done this before. Nelson scribbled something down. If he has, he's not sloppy about it. Guys like Vaughn don't get caught unless someone wants them to be. I pushed off the desk. Call me when you have something. Nelson watched me as I turned to leave. Hey, Carlisle. I stopped. You doing all right? I looked at him. He knew better than to ask stupid questions. He shrugged. Figured. Just don't do anything that'll get you in my other kind of files. I walked out without answering. The drive home was short. Valerie was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine, dressed in something that took effort. She looked up, smiled like nothing had changed. Hey, she said. You were out late. I nodded, walking past her, up the stairs. I didn't look back. She thought she was in the clear. Let her think that. For now. The next morning I woke early. Routine was something I never let slip, not even now. The weight of what I knew sat in the back of my head, but it didn't change the fundamentals: push-ups, cold shower, black coffee, the smell of gun oil as I checked my Glock. Valerie was still asleep when I left. That was good. I wasn't in the mood to play house. The drive into town was quiet, the streets just waking up. I pulled into a small strip on the edge of Denver where businesses opened early and people who worked with their hands didn't waste time. A dull neon sign flickered in the window of Emma's Pet Grooming, a small shop wedged between a laundromat and a bakery that always smelled better than it looked. I pushed the door open. A bell jingled, followed by the familiar sound of a blow-dryer. Emma was behind the counter, wrestling a golden retriever onto a grooming table. Strands of fur clung to her apron, her dark ponytail twisted up into something barely holding together. She looked up, smiling when she saw me. "Clayton, you finally bringing Duke in, or are you just here to look intimidating before breakfast?" "Duke's fine," I said. "Figured I'd stop by." She gave the retriever a scratch behind the ears before flicking off the dryer. "Uh-huh. You stopping by means something's either broken, bleeding, or about to be." Emma had known me for years, ever since Valerie insisted on keeping Duke looking presentable. I never saw the point in primping a German shepherd, but Emma did a good job and she didn't pry. I leaned against the counter. "You ever hear anything about Travis Vaughn?" Her expression shifted, playful to wary. "Vaughn? Yeah. He's around. He donates to the shelter, puts on those fancy fundraisers." She reached for a brush, running it through the dog's fur. "Why? He ever bring someone in here?" She kept brushing, but her paws told me enough. "Valerie's been in a couple times. Not with him, though. But connected." Emma exhaled, kept her focus on the retriever. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything." I nodded. "You're not." She glanced up. "Clayton. I'm just gathering information." She gave me a long look, then shrugged. "Yeah. He's got a reputation. Flashy. Charms the right people. Women like him. Women like his money." Emma smiled without humor. "Same thing. That was all I needed." I gave her a short nod and left. By noon, my phone rang. "Nelson. Got something," he said. "Your wife's been seeing Vaughn for about 6 months. Started slow at charity events, friendly meetings. Then the hotel stays. Nothing subtle." I clenched my jaw. "And the photos?" Nelson exhaled. "Came from inside Vaughn's circle. Someone close enough to him to want to burn him." That caught my attention. "Who?" "Still digging. But I can tell you this, Vaughn's got enemies. Some think he plays too big, pulls too many strings." A pause. "And you're not the first husband he's done this to." That last part settled differently. I already knew Valerie's part in this, but knowing Vaughn made a habit out of it, that made it personal. Nelson waited. "You want me to keep going?" "Yeah," I said. "I want to know everything." I hung up and sat there for a while, staring at the city through the windshield. Vaughn thought he could walk into my life, take what was mine, and walk out without a scratch. He was wrong about that. I didn't believe in reckless revenge. That was for men without discipline, without control. But consequences? Those were necessary. I drove home, the plan already forming in my mind. Valerie was in the kitchen when I walked in, her phone in hand, wine glass half full on the counter. She looked up, forced a bright smile. "You're home early." "Yeah." She hesitated. "Everything all right?" I set my keys down, watching her. "Why wouldn't it be?" She shifted, playing with the stem of her glass. "I don't know. You've been quiet." I let the silence stretch. Then I gave her what she wanted, a lie. "Just busy." She nodded slowly, searching my face for something she wouldn't find. I picked up the photos from the drawer, stacked them neatly. She didn't know I had them. Not yet. Let her keep feeling safe. It wouldn't last. I spent the next few days setting things in motion. Nelson kept digging, feeding me pieces of information. Valerie kept playing house, acting like nothing had changed, but I could see it, the careful way she watched me, the way she measured her words as if waiting for the floor to give out beneath her. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know what. I wasn't in a rush. Let them both settle into their false sense of security. Vaughn thought he was untouchable, and Valerie thought I was too blind to see what was in front of me. That was fine. The best traps worked when the prey didn't see them coming. On the third day, I placed the ad. It was simple, clean, and just vague enough to let the right people fill in the blanks themselves. Powerful men should be careful where they spend their nights. Some secrets don't stay secrets forever. I paid extra to have it run in the Denver business journals, the ones Vaughn's type read over their morning coffee. I knew how people like him operated. Control was everything, and rumors were a cancer. The right whispers could bleed a man dry faster than any bullet. By the time I got the call from Nelson that evening, Things were already moving. "You lit a fire," he said, the amusement clear in his voice. "Vaughn's people are scrambling. Someone showed him the ad this morning, and word is, he's trying to figure out who put it there." I turned the truck down a back road, the city lights fading behind me. "Good," Nelson chuckled. "You really gonna make him sweat it out like this? He's used to being the one pulling the strings. Then he'll have to learn what it feels like to be on the other end." There was a pause. "I found out who sent the photos. That got my attention." "Who?" "His driver. Name's Carl Monroe. Been with him for years. But Vaughn screwed him over, cut his pay, treated him like garbage. Guess Carl finally had enough." Nelson exhaled. "That's why I love rich pricks like Vaughn. They always forget the help is watching." I let that sit for a moment. "Where's Carl now?" "Hiding. He knows Vaughn's gonna come looking for him. Doesn't want to be around when it happens." "That was smart." "He say anything else?" "Just that Vaughn's not done with your wife yet. He's got a thing for married women, but he doesn't let go easy. Likes the game too much." I gripped the wheel, keeping my voice level. "She's still seeing him?" "Not in public. But yeah, she hasn't called it off. Might even think she's got a choice in this." "She didn't." "Not anymore." I pulled into my driveway, cutting the engine. The house was dark except for the glow of the kitchen light. Valerie was inside, probably sipping wine, pretending everything was fine. Maybe waiting for a text from Vaughn, or maybe she was starting to wonder why I wasn't acting the way she expected. "Appreciate it, Nelson," I said. "Keep an ear open. If he tries to move against me, I want to know first." "Not worried about your wife." I opened the truck door. "She made her choices. Now she gets to live with them." I hung up and stepped into the house. Valerie was at the counter, exactly where I expected her to be. She had a tablet open, scrolling through something, a fresh glass of wine in front of her. She glanced up. "You're late." I pulled off my jacket, hanging it by the door. "Had things to do." She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the glass. "Everything okay?" I met her eyes. "Yeah. Why wouldn't it be?" Her lips pressed together, a flicker of something in her expression. She was waiting for me to give something away, for any sign that I knew what she was up to. I gave her nothing. She went back to scrolling, taking a slow sip. "There's a gala next weekend. Vaughn's hosting. We got an invitation." That was bold. She was testing me now. "Can't," I said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Busy." She blinked, clearly thrown off by how easily I dismissed it. "It's important. A lot of big names will be there." "I'm not interested." She set the tablet down, watching me. "Clayton, what's going on?" I twisted the cap off the beer, took a drink, and leaned against the counter. "What do you mean?" "You've been acting different." I smirked. "How so?" She searched my face. "You're quiet. More than usual." I let a pause stretch, then shrugged. "Just been thinking." "About what?" I tilted my head slightly. "The choices people make." That hit the mark. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, and for the first time, I saw the flicker of real worry in her eyes. She covered it quickly, but it was there. "Good." I finished the beer in a few swallows and set the bottle down. "Gotta make a call." I left her sitting there, staring at the wine glass like it might hold the answers she needed. She was too late. The wheels were already turning. By the time she figured it out, there wouldn't be a damn thing she could do about it. The next day, I went to work like nothing was wrong. Meetings, calls, the usual. The men I worked with weren't the type to pry, and I wasn't the type to invite conversation. I kept my head down, focused on the tasks at hand, but in the back of my mind, I was already several steps ahead. By noon, Vaughn was sweating. Nelson called again, voice laced with amusement. "He's scrambling. Apparently, the ad spooked a few investors, and now they're asking questions. Rich men don't like loose ends, and right now, Vaughn's looking like one." "Good." I finished my coffee, glanced at the clock. "How's he reacting?" "He's pissed. Pressuring Valerie, from what I hear. Guess he figured she was the weak link." I expected that. Vaughn was a man who took what he wanted, and when things got tough, he leaned on those he thought he could control. I need her to feel it too, I said. Not just him. Nelson let out a low chuckle. Cold? All right. You want me to help speed things along? No, I said. She'll bury herself. Nelson exhaled. You really gonna walk away clean from this? I smirked. Not my mess. I'm just taking out the trash. I hung up and checked my watch. Valerie would be getting lunch soon. She had a routine: pretend to be the perfect wife in the morning, play the socialite in the afternoon. She still thought she was covering her tracks. I drove downtown, pulled into a cafe across from a small boutique where I knew she liked to shop. It was a high-end place, the kind that catered to women who wanted to feel important. I ordered a black coffee and sat near the window, watching. 15 minutes later, she walked out, phone to her ear. Dressed well, smiling, but her free hand was clenched into a fist at her side. She was tense. Vaughn must have had a word with her. She turned toward the parking garage. I stood, leaving my coffee behind, and followed at a distance. When she reached her car, she checked over her shoulder before unlocking it. I caught a glimpse of her phone screen, Vaughn's name at the top of the messages. I leaned against a nearby post and waited. She hesitated before getting in, her thumb hovering over her screen. Then she made a decision. She pressed the call button, lifted the phone to her ear. I stepped closer. I told you I can't talk right now, she hissed, voice low. A pause, then a sigh. Because he's been acting strange. I don't know if he knows, but I'm not taking chances. I watched her reflection in the car window. Her hand was gripping the steering wheel tight, knuckles white. She was nervous. She nodded slightly as she listened. I'll figure it out, okay? Just give me some time. Another pause. Yeah. Me too. She hung up and sat there for a few seconds, staring at the screen. Then she took a deep breath, started the car, and pulled out of the lot. I walked back to my truck, pulled out my phone, and sent Nelson a message. Make sure Vaughn gets the next batch of rumors by tonight. Hit his money this time. He replied almost immediately. Consider it done. By the evening, the cracks were turning into fractures. Valerie was quiet at dinner, distracted. I let her sit with it. No small talk, no forced conversation. Just the sound of silverware against plates. She set her fork down. Clayton. I took another bite, chewed slowly. Yeah? She hesitated. Do you ever feel like things change between people without them realizing? I swallowed. You asking or telling? She exhaled. I don't know. She shook her head. I feel like we've been distant. I met her eyes. You think? She flinched slightly but recovered fast. I just want to know if something's wrong. I took a sip of my drink, then leaned back in my chair. You sure you want the answer to that? Her fingers curled against her lap. She looked away. Forget it. She got up, taking her plate with her, moving too quickly. Guilt sat heavy on her, but she still thought she had control. She thought there was a way out. She was wrong. By the time she realized that, it would be too late. The next morning, I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the sun rise over the ridge. The air was crisp, the kind that cut straight through a man's lungs and reminded him he was still breathing. Valerie was still in bed, or at least pretending to be. I knew she wasn't sleeping much. She'd been restless, pacing the halls at night, checking her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She was waiting for something, an answer, a way out, maybe just for the ground to stop shifting under her feet. It wouldn't. My phone buzzed. Nelson. Vaughn's taking on water, he said. Words getting out about some questionable accounting in his charity work. He's doing damage control, but it's not sticking. People don't trust a man once they think he's a liar. I sipped my coffee. What else? He tried to talk to Valerie again. She didn't pick up. That was interesting. She's scared. Looks that way. Can't tell if she's scared of him or scared of you, though. Maybe both. Nelson chuckled. Could be. Either way, Vaughn's in free fall. Investors are pulling out, his name's starting to stink, and I hear a few people he's double-crossed are lining up to kick him while he's down. I let that sink in. It wasn't enough yet, but it was close. He's still got fight left in him? A little. But he's not used to being on the losing side. He'll make a mistake soon. Let me know when he does. I hung up and finished my coffee. Inside, Valerie was at the counter, dressed but not put together. No makeup, no bright colors today. That told me more than anything else. She was unraveling. You going into work today? She asked without looking up. Yeah. She hesitated, running her fingers along the rim of her mug. I was thinking maybe we should talk. I took my time rinsing my cup, setting it down in the sink. About what? She swallowed. About us. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. What about us? She looked up then, and for the first time in a long time I saw something real in her expression. Not charm, not deflection. Just uncertainty. I feel like I don't know you anymore, she said quietly. I let a beat pass. That's funny, I said. Because I feel like I've never known you at all. Her lips parted slightly as if she had something to say, but nothing came out. She looked down, gripping the mug with both hands. You think I don't know, Valerie? I asked. You think I don't see everything? Her breath hitched. Just for a second. Then she tried to recover. Clayton, I shook my head. Save it. She exhaled, slow and shaky. So what now? Now, I said, pushing off the counter, we see what happens when a man like Vaughn realizes he bet on the wrong horse. I walked out before she could say another word. By the time I got into the office, my mind was already on the next move. Valerie was cracking, Vaughn was cornered, and all that was left was watching how the pieces fell. Midday, Nelson called again. His voice had a different weight to it this time. Vaughn's in a tailspin. He's been making calls all morning, trying to get ahead of this thing. But here's the best part, he's trying to pin it on Valerie. I turned away from my desk, watching the city through the glass. What's he saying? That she came onto him. That she's been manipulating him, using him for money. He's got people already whispering that she was just some gold-digging housewife looking for a payday. I let that sit. That his plan? Throw her under the bus and hope it buys him time. Looks that way, Nelson said. But it won't work. He's too far gone. I was quiet for a moment. Valerie had made her bed. I had no sympathy for what came next. But there was something about it that still sat wrong with me, not because I cared, but because it was sloppy. Vaughn had always been about control. This wasn't control. This was panic. Something's off, I said. Yeah, Nelson agreed. Which is why I had one of my guys follow him this morning. And? He's got a meeting set up in about an hour. Not with lawyers, not with press. With some real quiet, real dangerous types. That got my attention. You got a name? Not yet. But it ain't a charity luncheon, I'll tell you that much. I grabbed my jacket. Send me the location. You going there yourself? Yeah. Nelson sighed. Didn't think you'd let me have all the fun. I ended the call and stepped out into the cold air. If Vaughn thought he could crawl his way out of this, he was in for one hell of a surprise. The location Nelson sent me was a high-end steakhouse on the north side of town, the kind of place where men in tailored suits made backroom deals over dry-aged ribeye. Vaughn liked places like this, dim lighting, private booths, the illusion of secrecy in a room full of men who all knew exactly what the others were up to. I pulled into the lot and parked in the back, out of sight. The truck didn't fit in here, but neither did I. That was the point. I walked in, took a quick scan. The bar was mostly empty, the lunch crowd just thinning out. A couple of old men nursed their bourbons near the windows and the waitstaff moved with quiet efficiency. Vaughn was in the far corner, tucked into a booth with two men who didn't belong. I knew the type, built thick, haircuts too sharp, watches too expensive. Not businessmen. Not hired security. They had the air of men who didn't ask questions and didn't take orders from anyone they didn't respect. Vaughn looked nervous. That was new. I moved to the bar, took a stool where I had a good line of sight, and ordered a black coffee. The bartender gave me a look but didn't argue. I waited, listening without looking like I was listening. One of the men leaned in, his voice low but firm. You said this wouldn't be a problem. Vaughn adjusted his tie, tried to act composed. It's not. I just need more time. Time's not the issue. The issue is attention. You're making noise. We don't like noise. Vaughn swallowed, nodded. I understand. I'll fix it. The second man smirked, swirling his drink. You're already losing, Vaughn. We just need to decide how much we're willing to let you lose before we cut our own losses. Vaughn's hand clenched into a fist under the table. He was used to being in charge, but here, he wasn't. I let it play out for a few more minutes, then made my move. I stood, stretched, and walked past their table like I was heading to the restroom. Vaughn caught sight of me first. His eyes widened, then narrowed. He didn't expect to see me, and he sure as hell didn't want to. I stopped just long enough. Afternoon, Travis, I said, casual, like we were old friends. The two men turned slightly, sizing me up. Vaughn forced a tight smile. Carlyle. I let my eyes drift to the men across from him. You make some new friends? Vaughn exhaled through his nose, irritation creeping in. What do you want? I smirked. Just checking in. You seemed stressed lately. Thought I'd make sure you're holding up all right. His jaw tightened. He didn't like being put on display. He definitely didn't like that the men across from him were now looking at him differently. One of them, the bigger one, leaned back. You two know each other? Vaughn forced a chuckle. Old acquaintance. Nothing important. I turned to the man. giving him my full attention. Carlyle. Clayton Carlyle. I extended a hand, and after a moment he shook it. Strong grip. Meant to prove something. Good to meet you, Carlyle. I don't suppose you're in business with Travis here. Not exactly, I said, watching Vaughn squirm. Just had a few dealings with him in the past. Some clean, some not. You know how it goes. The smirk from earlier faded. Yeah, the man said slowly. We do. Vaughn was about to open his mouth when I clapped him on the shoulder, firm enough to make him flinch. Well, I won't keep you. Looks like you've got enough on your plate. Vaughn glared at me, but he didn't say anything. He knew if he pushed, I'd push back, and he couldn't afford that in front of these men. I walked out, took my time getting to the truck, and waited. 10 minutes later, Vaughn came out alone. The men didn't follow. That told me everything I needed to know. He walked to his car, pulled out his phone, and started dialing. I called Nelson. Vaughn's got a bigger problem than me, I said. Nelson chuckled. I figured. Words already spreading. His name's turning to mud. He's losing friends faster than he can count. Let him sink, I said. But I want him to know exactly why it's happening. You want me to let him know you're pulling the strings? No, I said, watching as Vaughn slammed his car door shut. I want him to figure it out on his own. I hung up and drove home. Valerie was in the kitchen again. Another glass of wine in front of her. She didn't look up when I walked in. You see Vaughn today? She asked, her voice flat. Yeah, I said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. He's not having a good week. She inhaled sharply. What did you do? I took a sip, watching her over the rim of the bottle. I didn't do anything. He did this to himself. Her fingers curled around the stem of the glass. Clayton, I didn't want this. I smirked. Then you should have thought of that before you jumped in bed with a man who makes enemies for a living. Her jaw clenched. So that's it? You're just going to what? Destroy him? He's doing a fine job of that himself. She stood, her hands shaking now. And me? What happens to me? I finished the beer, set the bottle down, and met her eyes. You already know. She exhaled through her nose, nodded once, and walked out of the room. I didn't follow. There was nothing left to say. A week later, Vaughn was finished. Not just wounded, done. The kind of ruin that men like him never recovered from. His name was dirt, his business a carcass, and his so-called allies had scattered like rats from a sinking ship. He tried to fight it, to throw money at the problem, to smear Valerie in a desperate last attempt at control. But it didn't stick. The moment people stopped fearing him, they stopped listening to him. And once a man like that loses his grip, there's nothing left. Nelson sent me the final update over coffee. Vaughn's skipping town, he said, lighting a cigarette on the other end of the line. Word is he's heading to Europe. Friend of a friend pulled some strings for him, but he won't be playing king anymore. I took a sip, leaning back against the porch railing. Good. Nelson exhaled smoke. You're cold, Carlyle. He knows it was you. He just doesn't have the balls to say it out loud. Doesn't matter. He won't be a problem anymore. Nelson chuckled. And Valerie? She's gone. It had been quick. Clean. The divorce papers were already in motion, and the house, my house, was legally out of her reach. The only thing she left with was her car and whatever dignity she had left, which wasn't much. She tried to make a case for herself, tried to cry, tried to spin it like she had been the real victim. I hadn't given her the satisfaction of a reaction. I'd signed the papers, handed her the keys, and watched as she drove away without looking back. Nelson sighed. Well, you got what you wanted. What now? I looked out at the mountains. The sky stretched wide and empty. Same as always. You ever get tired of it? No. He chuckled again, softer this time. Didn't think so. If you ever need work, you know where to find me. I hung up, tossing the phone onto the table. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and dust, the only kind of purity left in the world. I finished my coffee, stretched out my shoulders, and breathed in deep. I didn't need a fresh start. I didn't need closure. I needed exactly what I had: silence, control, and the knowledge that I had cut the rot out of my life without hesitation. Vaughn would rot overseas, Valerie would struggle, and I would keep moving forward, same as always. Because that's what men like me do.